This is the Wingman. Do your pre-flight checks, get your helmet on and strap in because we're going 9Gs here. We're taking you to new heights in business. And welcome to the second episode of The Wingman. My name is Brad Barker. Today I've got a very exciting guest with me, someone whom I believe is one of the best developers of leaders in the industry. His name is Shawn Price. He is the founder and the director of Positive Intelligence. Welcome, Shawn.
Thanks, Brad.
I first discovered you when I was looking for some career advice a long time ago. And as it turns out, I believe you're one of the best career advisors in the country. But then the more I got to know you, the more I realised that you're actually a well-renowned developer of leaders in Australia. Anyway, obviously after I used your services, I started to get to know a bit more about you. And it's particularly when I was in that time where I was looking a lot into emotional intelligence and the effect of it has in leadership today.
Well, I found that in career counselling. That's where I started because I wasn't originally registered as a psychologist. So when I was working in the career counselling space, I realised there was a huge gap and no one really did it properly. People only ever experienced a school career counsellor, which is very basic. And I worked at Right Management Consulting for many years, and I sort of built on from that using a tool called the Berkman Method, which I found is absolutely outstanding. And I guess when I was working with people, you realise that underneath it all, there's emotions that are holding them back from having a career that they really want, and that's just universal for leaders. So even when I work with leaders, it very much is about helping them to find some vision and purpose, which is really what career counselling is about too. So there's a lot of parallels.
Yeah. So you've had an interesting journey yourself. I mean, you started out as a maths major, didn't you? And
yeah, that's right. Did a double degree in mathematics, which is a bit crazy.
Yeah. So you haven't been a psychologist your whole life. This is something that you found later in life, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I worked in IT accidentally. I call it the accidental career. You do uni. I didn't know any better, and I could do maths, and I just fell into IT in the 80s and 90s because really that's where the demand was. And you get married and you have family, and next thing you're locked into a career. And I was very stuck and not knowing what I wanted to do. So I guess I really empathise with people who are stuck as well. And there's a lot of soul searching and a lot of work on my own, emotions and where I was at and my belief systems. And I had to prove that you could change, and I wanted to prove that to myself before I tried to help other people change. So I had to let go of everything I thought about myself, and to go back to university with 3 kids and work be the breadwinner. When the secret I hide from a lot of people is failing English in high school, and maybe I had a learning disorder. I don't know why, I just couldn't do it, and that held me back a long time. And I had to believe that couldn't be true, and and the same even with presenting. There was a lot of things I had to push past, and it was a self-experiment based on all the stuff I'd read effectively to become a psychologist. So I was very motivated to get the full registration, which was 12 years.
Boy, so you spent 12 years to become a registered psych?
Correct, yeah, because I had to do it by distance, part-time, some on campus. It was a huge, huge journey.
You're fairly well established in the IT space. You decide to undertake this massive career change, and you've gone into psychology. And how have you found that that's been able to help the people that you work with?
Look, I think if I had the privilege to stand in front of people and talk to them, or even coach one person, I really had to know my stuff. And I thought, now if I'm going to know my stuff about humans or what makes them tick, I should become a psychologist. That was pretty much the mindset. And I think it's more about a duty of care and all that in what I do. And to make sure that the tools I use and the methods I use are evidence-based. So that was the focus. And from there, it's snowballed. Really, I haven't really marketed a whole lot. It's just my whole business is built by word of mouth. And for me, I'm very focused on individuals and their development and their change. And particularly in leadership, I think at the moment, leadership training and the level of leadership emotional intelligence we have in Australia is really poor.
Let's unpack that a bit. Why do you say it's poor in Australia in particular?
And it's probably my perspective because I'm probably brought in to help when things are going wrong. But, you've only got to look at statistics around people's satisfaction with work and employees' turnover, all those types of things. And I think, we have a lot of leaders who just avoid the self-awareness, and, there's this, I think, always a dual purpose in corporate life where we've, self-interest versus the greater good, where people are earning money, they're getting good salaries as leaders, and they can churn and burn a little bit the staff in order to reach a target or hit a target, but then they go on to another job and the cycle continues. And yet you've got other leaders who are highly emotionally intelligent and get amazing results and long-term results.
So, Shawn, I've always been fascinated about emotional intelligence because besides the fact that I work in that space myself, the one thing I learnt early on is that in order to be, statistically, you're more likely to be successful if you're emotionally intelligent rather than having a high IQ. So somewhere along the line, we lost our way and we said IQ is more important. But now, do you see that there's a bit of a shift towards getting more emotionally intelligent people in positions of leadership today?
Well, I think the people who understand emotional intelligence are definitely pushing that. I think IQ can get in the way of our emotions, there's no question. And people really without education don't understand what they're dealing with. They hear the word emotion and go, oh, emotions, rather than it's actually a primitive intelligence system that undoes everything in organisations. So it really is about understanding what it is. I think my experience is once people understand what that system is, they stop fearing it and actually can work with it.
So what's an example of somebody that's emotionally intelligent?
Well, I define emotional intelligence as the ability to be in the right mood at the right time for the right thing. And to me, it's realizing that we all have biases and a set of experiences in life, that none of us know everything. None of us can meet every person in the world. None of us can have every experience in the world. So therefore, we've all got a perspective that we bring to the table. And that's what leaders should do. They've got to have the guts to share their perspective, but no one's right. So to me, the element of emotional intelligence is curiosity, is being able to be in situations where we're able to take a breath, look at and sum up the circumstances, because we have this tripwire, which is the primitive limbic system that can lead people to very rapid judgment. So, I joke about it when, if I go to a party and say people I'm a psychologist, people will just back away slowly because they have a stereotype of what a psychologist is. But they don't really know me, they haven't got to know me. And it's true of all staff, we all make these stereotypes and judgments, but that's an error of thinking, actually. So curiosity primarily is, I think, a key element of it.
Great. So actually being able to not going off your first base instinct in a situation, but actually sitting back, removing yourself and being curious about a situation.
Yeah, it's realizing as a leader you're going to have biases, whether you like it or not, you do. And sometimes those biases are right, and sometimes they're going to deliver profit, no question, and we can burn, and sometimes it's required. So I'm not saying we can't be authoritative or we can't be. It's choosing when, and it's being strategic about, does this situation demand either a directive management style? Does it demand a more curious style? To me, that's the essential element.
So, Shawn, when you talk about biases, are you talking about generally what our personality's like? Like that's sort of our bias, what our usual personality is?
Yeah, it's the sum total of all our experiences, and we could say, there's a lot of debate in psychology about personality and, how much of it is inherited, how much of it is changeable, and pretty much the recent evidence is that a lot of it's modifiable. Once we're born, it's modifiable from that point on. For most people, they don't change a whole lot because it's very hard to change. But there's been clear studies where we've taken introverts and put them through training, and they can come out much higher in extroversion on a personality test. So personality does provide a bias, and that's sort of why I like the Berkman method, because it's a tool that actually does show that underlying bias that we all have. It's unarguable. It's a research. It's not a guesswork. It's not a theory tool. It's based on research. So that ability for a leader to have an awareness over their biases, because what I see out there when I'm working with organisations is many leaders lose their jobs. They get spurious bullying complaints against them, and quite often it's not a genuine case of bullying. It's a personality differences, because one leader thinks the world is all like this, and they're not able to deal with other certain personality types.
Can you unpack that a bit more? Like what do you, when you say that it's really just a conflict of personality, what do you mean? Why is it being interpreted as bullying?
Well, pretty much, I think the cost to organisations of bullying is huge at the moment, and and there's a lot of, and the cost to investigate those cases and bring, legal people in to put together and it goes on for 6 weeks. And I watch the manager go through absolute hell and the staff member on stress leave and so forth and so on. It's really a lack of communication. Now, in most cases, I'm not saying there's not genuine bullying out there, and there are, and we know in any population there's going to be a number of sociopaths and narcissists that are out there, and no amount of empathy is going to work with them. But that's not all, and bullying cases. So what we see is often there's a staff member who's, perhaps more sensitive, or they've got more emotionality than maybe the manager, or their perception of that manager is the manager's uncaring, when the manager maybe doesn't show a lot of emotions, but they probably are caring. This is what I commonly see, that it's completely a misperception, not necessarily an intent. So it's about the intent behind the situation, and often that intent is confused.
Right, gotcha. So the big difference between bullying and personality conflict is intent.
Yeah, strategic intent to make someone feel less than, to me, would be bullying.
Yeah.
Most of the cases I deal with, the manager's a bit going, why are they feeling like this? They're not understanding why. One, because the manager's not reading the emotions, or they're not showing their emotions. They're, and it's misinterpreted by the staff member. Now, the staff members have a role to play in being a bit more resilient too.
Yep.
But is the organisation offering the resilience training? Are they understanding that to do that? I generally say in my seminars that people are 100% responsible for how they feel. It's their emotions, it's their perception. That makes everyone a bit accountable. It doesn't excuse bad behaviour, but if you're in control of your emotions, then you get control of your life.
You use Berkman a lot, which is an assessment tool that's out there. And so how does it compare to something like DISC or Les Briggs-Myers and Myers-Briggs,
There's thousands of personality tests, but a lot of them are what we call type tests. So they have a theory of the personality. So for Myers-Briggs has 16 types.
Yep.
DISC has 4 or whatever. So they have a theory of how people are, and then they ask you questions to map you into that theory, rather than say, here's a body of research collected over 68 years, a sample of over 3 million people. What patterns are we seeing in that? So an example of Berkman has 16 billion possible outcomes versus Myers-Briggs, which has 16 outcomes. So, the problem with some of the tools, they're still useful, but they can lead to that stereotyping. And that's the kind of complaint I constantly hear. Oh, everyone just thought I was an INFP and that's it. But we're not. As simple as that. All of us can be everything and adapt to situations. So personality is a starting point.
Interesting.
And to me, that's what's demanded in leadership. I don't care when I work with leaders, I say, I don't care what your personality is. I said, that's your starting point. I said, the truth is, if you need to be introverted, you can be introverted. If you need to be extroverted, you can do that. It's just that some of those behaviours are going to be harder for you to do just because you're not used to them.
Yeah.
But the truth is, we can all do everything.
I write with my right hand a lot and not use my left hand at all. So, but that's sort of like my personality. It's my go-to. It's my path of least resistance. Yeah. Whereas emotional intelligence is sort of like utilising my opposite hand. It's something I don't normally use and do, but the more that I do it, the better I get at it. I
think emotional intelligence is using both. I mean, it's knowing when to use your strengths. We'd probably describe your personality as your strength behaviours. Emotional intelligence is the awareness over when you need to use those behaviours or when you need to use different behaviours. So,
because we'll have different times throughout our lives or scenarios where we go, okay, yes, I tend to be a bullish character, but it's appropriate to use that right now.
It might be in a crisis, for example. You'd want to be directive and bullish, and if health and safety is at risk, then that's probably appropriate. But maybe when you're trying to get a customer service team to function and deal with angry customers,
what would you say would be one of the biggest differences you've made through the teachings that you bring?
Oh, gee, good question, because I've been doing it for 15 years, so it's hard to pick one example, but I often think of individuals rather than, and I tend to be where I focus, because I think with individual change comes the overall company change. So, I think often of an example of one of my clients with a PA who actually attended a lot of training and workshop, but, from that whole belief system change is now a senior manager. And those kind of growth stories to me excite me. I guess at a more senior level, work with the CEO of an organisation and, I guess watch her really flourish and manage people who she found previously very difficult and how much she embraced that and how much the staff surveys of their culture changed over time, because of that, and the staff being amazed about how this leader changed. And, staff who previously wanted her gone were now saying, oh, no, she's fantastic. And it shows you how you can turn things around pretty quickly. And it comes back to the individual relationships.
Would you say that that's because she realised that, I don't have to be a particular way? Or what do you think that was?
Again, it was the self-awareness, and it was the self-awareness of looking at her personality and realising that, she was shown on a continuum where there was a lot of percentage of people that were very, very different to her, and she didn't even have awareness over that. And that's her previous judgment, maybe of those people, they're just difficult or they don't work the same way she does. But her awareness over, well, actually they offer value and I know how to manage them now, it changed the playing field for that organisation.
So would you say that emotional intelligence, if you wanted to work on it and develop it, it starts with awareness?
100%, yeah. I think it starts with awareness. I mean, I think awareness is the greatest teacher, and one of the things we often do I also work clinically, is what I call psychoeducation. It sounds we're educating people to be psychos, but in fact, it's actually educating them about their brain and how it functions, and that's a huge, I think a lot of people are smart. There's a lot of information on the internet, and to understand the engine room of how your brain and emotional limbic system works. Once you understand that, you understand why strategies work in leadership or why emotional intelligence strategies. But I think to just go and tell people to go and do affirmations in the mirror, but they don't know why that works or if it works. Yep. I'm not saying that they necessarily work, but you can sometimes get a lot of training. It's people are protecting that underlying knowledge. So I think that's critical. And, I was a footy coach for a while, and I taught that underlying knowledge to an under 15 team. And, the change in them, they came out and beat a side that had beaten them by 10 goals both times. They come out in the final and knocked them over. And the parents going, what's got into them? And I said, it's belief. They realised that the self-doubt they had was where it was coming from. And I did a little session with them. A bit unfair to have a psychologist as a footy coach, but... it was amazing to see that. It was amazing to see that result.
If there's a leader watching today saying, "I want to explore this emotional intelligence side of things more," what advice would you give to them?
Go for it. I mean, obviously, I think there's a lot of fear. I think it's I think a lot of leaders are just overwhelmed with hitting targets. Emails, you name it. They just see it as, well, it's the soft and fluffy stuff that maybe can put aside when you've got clear, definite things to do. So, but the reality is, it's sort of if you do the emotional intelligence stuff first, you actually have less of the other things to do. So that'll be my view of it. I'm probably not explaining that great, but I look at the footy clubs in Victoria, from Richmond, who changed the way they did things. Collingwood changed the way they did things. All of a sudden, they get success. People clearly in research want to know they're cared for, and if they're cared for, they'll do more and take more workload off you, and you'll get less turnover. And it seems to me so basic. So I don't understand why they don't embrace it, to be honest. I think
you've got a question that you ask most of the people when you go out and do training, and the very first thing that I noticed that I've heard that you ask is that throughout your day, what percentage of your day, your work day, would you say that you're talking with people?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? I find this one fascinating. Every group seminar I run, I'll ask that question about, well, what percentage of your day is actually, and your job is talking to people, that interaction, whether you're writing an email, whether you're standing at the photocopier or you're in a meeting or whatever. The average answer is 85 to 90%. This is in subjective interchange between two people. And so if people don't think that emotional intelligence isn't involved in your success, they're crazy. I mean, nearly every leader, most leaders are saying 95% of their job is talking to another human being. And the subtle art of understanding how to influence, how to get people on side, how to break down barriers, it's all emotional intelligence.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That's why it's linked to leadership success. But, it's because it's ambiguous for a lot of leaders, they get scared of it.
Yeah.
And, but, I guess my skill is making it unambiguous.
So if you were to work with a team to help them build resilience, where do you start with that?
I'll firstly find out what's going on. So generally it's purging what's happening and getting the real information out. So perceptions, assessments.
When you say purging, do you mean like venting out?
Yeah, letting them vent a little bit, hearing what their perceptions are, but I don't necessarily believe perceptions. As a good friend of mine, Susan David at Harvard says, that emotions are directions, not facts. They're not facts.
Yeah.
They're not facts. And that's the big point. When people believe emotions are facts, they're in all sorts of trouble.
I heard that emotions are only right 15% of the time, something like that.
Yeah, well, I always like to think of emotions as a hypothesis. They're your past giving you a guess on what's going to happen next. So they are a hypothesis. They're still data. They're still interesting.
Yeah.
And they still could be right, but quite often they're over-exaggerated. They're not accurate.
But we're emotional beings, so it's always going to play a part in
it's an important
the interactions that we have. Yeah.
It plays all a part. Yeah. Any time a team's undone, it's due to emotions. I mean, you've only got to look at sport. Elite sport's a great example because, we're seeing in most elite sport players struggling with depression and all kinds of things. And it's a massive pressure cooker, but you see the results on the field. A lot of people can kick a football or do a touchdown or whatever. They've all got the skill.
Yeah.
They can all get the fitness. We can all do the weights. So what's the difference between elite and non-elite?
Yeah, it's mental.
It's resilience, and that's why, I guess Richmond have been so successful lately.
Yeah. And Collingwood not so successful.
Yeah.
Sorry. I know you're a Collingwood
the same
supporter.
in NRL and various other codes, but, it's universal. Same in corporate teams.
So, Shawn, there's people out there that are probably listening today that probably find themselves in situations where they continue to repeat the same silly mistakes that they have made in the past, even though they know it's wrong. I'm sure there's some people out there that keep tripping up in some ways. What advice would you have for people that are doing that sort of thing in business or in life?
Firstly, probably go easy on yourself because I think we all trip up, even us psychologists, But I think understanding the brain and going a little bit deeper and understanding why your brain's doing what it's doing and how we develop habits. To me, we see anxiety on the rise like there's no tomorrow, and the cost to organisations is unbelievable. Stress leave, all kinds of stuff that goes on. And anxiety is really a part of the human condition. We cannot get rid of it. You can't get rid of anxiety. It's our nature. And if you understand the brain and our limbic brain, I think with the better scanning technology now, we understand that emotions are happening in 8 milliseconds, very, very quick. Yet our conscious logic is 500 to 600 milliseconds. So it's much slower. So we're always playing catch up with emotion. And a lot of our habits we develop are designed to avoid uncomfortable things we're not used to. If you think of the emotional brain as a pattern recognition machine, and it wants to feel comfortable. It's afraid of change. It's afraid of different things.
Yeah.
So we develop habits that are comfortable. That might be coming home from work and having a drink. One of the most common ways to deal with anxiety is to drink. And people who suffer, alcoholism and things like that, it's really a form of covering up anxiety. If we don't treat the underlying anxiety, it's hard to stop the drinking.
It's self-medicating, right?
Absolutely. But people self-medicate in different ways. They can self-medicate by being a workaholic. They can self-medicate by, becoming OCD or, being incredibly neat or...
Never thought of that.
Yeah, it's underneath it all. I mean, primarily when people come to the clinic, it's underneath it all is the ability to manage that emotional system and brain and recognize the patterns that are there, and then to have the belief that we can change those patterns.
Right. So it starts with recognizing the pattern. Then how do you get the belief into the person?
I guess I work with a cost-benefit analysis pretty much, is going, what's the benefit of drinking versus not drinking if we're working on anxiety. So I'll say to clients sometimes, anxiety is really good for you. They go, what do you mean? I said, well, because you get to drink heaps. You get to drink 12 beers every night. That's, I wouldn't mind doing that. I said, what's the cost to you? Well, I might die earlier. Oh, I say. So what are you going to do instead,
Right.
So there's people often don't recognize the fact there is benefits in some of their habits that they maybe don't like, or maybe overeating or whatever it is. There's a comfort factor in it until we recognize the benefit and then maybe look at the cost-benefit analysis. Then I see people absolutely change completely. I've watched one of my clients probably lost 30 kilos, a young guy, changed his job, changed his career, went from being suicidal to having his life together. Once we worked out, and he was more OCD than anything, and once we worked out, the cost-benefit analysis of the costs associated to, and the benefits of being OCD. What's it doing for him? Well, it's safe. I don't have to get rejected by people. Oh, okay. So in the end, all this stuff comes to that ability to have a good hard look at yourself, basically, and realize we can do anything. It's just not always easy to break the habits.
So there's aspects of where anxiety is good for us.
Absolutely.
Because
it's who we are.
Yeah.
But
so it's innate.
You think
we're
of
all going to have anxiety at some
Correct.
stage. It's just more, what do we do with it?
Exactly. You go to somewhere new or you do something new, like you go skydiving. Would you have anxiety? We may call it stress or scared, but it's still the same system.
Same thing.
It's the same system because we're not used to it.
Yeah.
It's going, whether we like it or not, or it's like a person giving their first speech at work. You know, they're terrified of public speaking, but is it really dangerous? Not really. But they can't stop the system. That's the important point, to realize the emotions happen in 8 milliseconds, that you can't actually stop this until you learn the pattern. The absolute cure for anxiety, all anxieties, is exposure. Go and do it. But you've got to have coping mechanisms. So if you're afraid of public speaking, you've got to have methods to try and calm the system so you can actually start to have the experiences that are positive.
Great. So what are some methods for...
Well, there's no easy answer. We all want to take a pill and fix it. But reality is, I hated public speaking. I was terrified of it. I was a math student. I was a math geek, and I'd blush public speaking. And now I get paid to speak in front of big groups and I don't feel nervous. But people will look at me and go, oh, what a natural speaker. But I'm not a natural speaker at all. I did 5 years of Toastmasters. I did everything to do with speaking. I did stand-up comedy and I'm not even funny.
Yeah.
Prove to my emotional brain. And what I was doing was proving to my emotional brain that it's not dangerous. Wow. So it's like someone with a phobia of lifts. They may have got a scary experience when they were little of a lift at 2. So their emotional brain remembers that experience. And anytime they go anything near a lift, that emotional experience comes back and haunts them. So how to cure that? Get in the lift. While you're calm, though, you've got to be calm.
Gotcha.
And pair calming to the same stimulus. So same with public speaking. You've got to slowly it's like we can't get rid of the pattern, but we can overwhelm it with a new pattern. We can install new programs into the brain.
So we've got an emotional brain, which is driving a lot of the decisions.
Absolutely.
And a lot of the things.
All decisions are emotional.
Yep. All decisions.
Well proven.
So we're all right. So a lot of our brain is driven, or the actions that we do is, you said all of the decisions we make are based in emotion.
Correct.
Right. So if we're making bad decisions, there's something to do with our emotional brain.
Well, yeah, you can look at 2 spreadsheets and says one spreadsheet's going to feel better than the other, even though the numbers might look better. But in the end, we're talking about the mechanism for decisions to happen is emotion. So they've had case studies with stroke patients who've lost access to emotions, cannot make decisions whatsoever, can't decide what toothpaste to buy. So the final flip of the switch is still emotional.
And our emotions are simple, right? We either want to go towards pleasure or away from pain.
Correct.
So anything that we do is either towards pleasure or away from pain.
And each person we know, everyone in the world, we all have a unique set of pleasure and pain memories, in there that we reference.
And where do they come from? I mean, I guess they come from birth and
if not before birth. Yeah, there's stuff in there we don't even remember ourselves, So the art of psychology is helping people change those unconscious patterns. It's not the logic. You can buy books for logic and patterns. And we do give people coping mechanisms, but if people are, wanting techniques, there's 2 forms of techniques we work with. There's ways to cope. So if you are doing a speech, I might give people relaxation techniques and ways to hack the emotional brain and see yourself as got 2 brains, get that thing calm so you can actually get your logic out and perform the speech. But there's also resolving techniques where we actually change the pattern deep down so it becomes a new habit. We install a new program.
Wow,
that's the art of psychology.
So tell me a bit about the hacking. What do you do there when you're hacking?
Well, the hacking is things like affirmations or doing a power pose or, from Amy Cuddy or, breathing exercises. So the bottom line is we've got little programs in there that force the emotional brain to relax and force it to release oxytocin, vasopressin. So, just standing confidently with your arms on your hips and things like that, and taking some deep breaths when you breathe in a bit quicker than you breathe out is a signal to the body to relax.
I just did it then. I felt very relaxed.
Yeah. You watch, if you watch people in public eye, you'll see them holding that power pose, hands on hips, or when you tell your kids off. It's so the body thinks, okay, we're confident now.
Yeah, fascinating.
So we've got to realize we've got a body brain and a highly cognitive brain.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Thanks for that.
We've got to hack the body a little bit, and that helps us.
Yeah.
Maybe recondition the underlying habits.
Like I hear exercise helps a lot with anxiety too. So is that why anxiety Is that why exercise helps with it as well? Because that's that body hack?
It probably gives you a bit of mindfulness. It flushes the cortisol, adrenaline out. So most people are running with way too much stress chemicals in their bloodstream. If you're thinking of it as a body brain, it's an old brain. It's an old chemical brain, and it uses chemicals to give you information. So by running or exercising in the 150 minutes a week type intensity, you're flushing all those chemicals out and you restart. So you're going to be in a much better position to handle things. Yeah. It doesn't cure necessarily. What it does, we would say in psychology, if people just, ate right, exercised enough and slept well, they would cut the visits to psychologists in half.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. Now, there's so many more other things that affect our emotional state. And I've heard you talk about this as well. So, I mean, obviously exercise and eating are a few of those things in your environment, but can you elaborate what other things impact on our emotional state?
Everything. I mean, if you, Lisa Feldman Barrett wrote a book on, names escape me, How Emotions Are Made, and very interesting neuroscience, and really about how so many variables, emotions are constructed in an instant. From a whole variety of things, like a symphony orchestra of things, how well you slept the night before, how your hormone levels, your amount of sleep you had, what's happening to you, your recent experiences. There's a whole, in any one moment, the environment we're sitting in or the environment we're standing in, the people talking to us. So you've got to think of emotions as this constructed thing based on a whole myriad of variables, including our blood sugar levels. Everyone knows the word hangry, so that's why we've got to be curious with our emotions, because it's not as simple as, I'm just angry and that means that person. Often they're just a trigger point at the photocopier, Someone might be curt to someone else in the office. Well, what's going on for that person? Have they just got off the phone with their partner? Have they eaten lunch? Have they, are they under financial pressure? You don't know. That's why I say you got to be curious. Yeah, you might just be the person who tips them over into anger. And when anger happens, people have lost all rational control.
Brilliant. Look, I think the penny's dropping for me when you say be curious. That's the start of being a very good leader. Be curious about the emotion that the other person's feeling. Be curious about the emotions that you're feeling. You want to see
leaders do mostly where they make a mistake is probably they don't want to know. They just don't want to unpack that. They think they've got to fix it all. They don't. They just got to understand what's going on for their staff, and then they can use the various mechanisms within the company to help that staff member get back to fulfill the role obligation.
That's brilliant.
But they just don't want to know. And
why do you think they want to know?
I think they're time poor. I think they feel like it's going to take too long.
Does it?
No. I think it can be done very quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
what's an example of that? Doing it very quickly.
Well, I think it's just checking in the mornings. It could be just that walking past and pausing for 30 seconds. How you going? What's going on for you? Those little moments we see. There is research saying that leaders who walk the floor outperform leaders who don't.
Yeah.
And the amount of staff that would say to me, the manager walked in, didn't even acknowledge I was here. Simple stuff. It's actually simple and it doesn't take a lot of time.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
You keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah.
There's various methods to do it.
So the overarching message from today is be curious. Be curious about your emotions and the people's emotions around you.
Well, look, the bottom line is the knowledge is there for the leaders. The information's there. It's why don't they know it?
Do you find that there's leaders out there that, you said that they don't do it because they're time poor, but I suspect that some leaders may not do it because they're too scared.
Well, that's the anxiety system, isn't it? I said people are workaholics. One way to manage anxiety or not feel uncomfortable. None of us want to feel uncomfortable. We define uncomfortable as something bad's going to happen, but maybe we're learning. Maybe uncomfortable is we're learning and we're building capacity.
Yeah, they may be too scared. What if somebody does get emotional and they don't want that, right?
Exactly.
And that's the fear.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting. And that's why, therefore, they avoid it and they want to pretend that it's not happening.
And that's why they end up with a bullying complaint against them down the track somewhere.
Yeah.
Or turnover or however it manifests. Yep.
Brilliant. Yeah. It's not brilliant if that happens, right?
No.
But yeah. Well, Shawn, I've certainly learnt a tremendous amount. So, and I think the big thing is be curious. Starts with self-awareness. Yep. The difference between bullying and personality conflict is intent. It's been outstanding. I've really appreciated you talking with us today, and thanks very much for that. I can certainly see why a lot of people like to engage you for leadership development and professional development. So thanks for coming in today, Shawn. It's been wonderful talking with you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.